Actually, I just remembered to record. So we're now
Pardon?
recording.
Okay.
Right. So we had a couple of meetings actually. This was last Friday. The first meeting was just with staff and Jen from Jan Bolton to talk about eligibility on Lars Anderson and Muddy River bridges. That then rolled almost right afterwards into a meeting with the subcommittee where we reported out on our findings. Basically, the gist of the Muddy River Bridges application is that we feel that it would be eligible, but that there was a lot of questions about timing and with such a complicated project with a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of funding that's ultimately going to be needed. A question about, I think, and I'm going to paraphrase that, Nancy, in particular, your concern with going before the advisory group, select board, and town meeting without having something more firm in hand, some sort of indication from more of the players, especially Boston, about a willingness to fund the improvements on their side. And so I think that's how we left it. Oh, and the staff also indicated that they didn't want to piecemeal things. They said, please either just fund the study this fiscal year as a whole, or don't, or put it off for another year if you need more information or that kind of thing. And then I think we also talked about a third option and potentially a warrant placeholder while they try to come up with some information in the meantime. But I don't know if that's feasible, viable, or not on their part.
Okay, well, thank you for that. It is feasible to put it on the warrant and then withdraw it.
Mhm.
And the idea is to, we like the things are in not very good shape, as we reported to you before. So we don't want them to get worse and worse and worse. But there are some substantial outstanding questions. Now, by my calculation, I have two copies of supposedly the same chart, but they have different ownership. So I'm not positive that my statistics are correct, but it seems that Brookline and Boston share 9 of the bridges. DCR controls 2 of the bridges. The MBTA is involved in 1 of the bridges with MassDOT, I think. So we don't even have ownership of certain of the bridges in order to, meet the requirement of site control. So that's one issue. The other issues are, you know, we usually fund a plan knowing that it's not going to be something we just end up putting on the shelf, because once it's on the shelf, once we fund it and it gets done and then it's stale, then I have to do it again. And that's not how CPA would like to fund its projects. So one option, and the other thing we requested at the meeting is that Laura work on having a meeting with the town administrator. I think we have to put this into the hands of some of the town leadership because the issues are so complex. And we need the town administrator to reach out, maybe to Mayor Wu, to the DPW commissioner in Boston, to DCR, MBTA, and MassDOT about their role in all of this. And so I know that Laura is working on that, and hopefully it will happen in this month, in February. But it seems to me that if we're in favor of the project on principle, that it's a good idea to put it into the warrant and explain that we may have to remove it if you know, before town meeting, which we're allowed to amend our warrant article in that way. If we can't get all the pieces in place. And I'm interested in that idea because you know, as I said before, we've gone to the site, we've seen the deteriorating condition of the bridges. So if we can get it done this year, that would be great. The other option, I suppose, is to get it done, but to have a lot of conditions that have to be met first, including an agreement with a written agreement with you know, Boston, with DCR, with MassDOT, with MBTA. You can imagine that this does get complex. And then bring it back to the November town meeting. So that's the other option. I'm not in his favor of that, just because I think it's more cumbersome, but you know, if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. These bridges really do need work. Laura, I will comment to you that I have 2 copies of this Excel spreadsheet that Bill made, and they have differences. And so I wasn't sure exactly how to reconcile them. So I'll have to get together with him and figure it out, especially in terms of ownership. So at any rate, so I guess the question is whether we're going to whether the committee wants to go ahead and move forward as much as we can with this and keep it on the warrant as a placeholder, because we're never going to get it decided by by February 25th, or whether we want to just say we'll shelve it until next year. And that's at some level our choice in the first instance. And then if we decide we want to go forward, I think we need to put it into the mix of everything and figure out how we're going to fund all the things. So I don't know, what are people's reactions to that idea? Steve?
Thanks, Nancy. You know, when we first talked about this project, yeah, I agree these bridges need repair. But we were all feeling pretty good about, you know, being generous and getting out ahead of this. And even though Boston wasn't prepared to participate, we thought maybe we could, as I said, get out ahead of things. But, you know, when it comes down to some reality, and we're looking at much more in terms of requests than we have in funding. I don't think this project passes the test at this point. I think by suggesting we might award some funds to this, and we also, I'm not sure where we ended up with determining that only the purely pedestrian bridges would qualify and what the relative cost of that aspect of the original project would be. But I think if we indicate that we might fund this now, we're losing any leverage that we have with the city of Boston, who ought to be partnering with us on those 9 pedestrian bridges and
That's a good point.
sitting back and letting us go ahead and spend our money on it. When, you know, I'm sure they've got budget constraints too, but you know, their CPA funds are far greater than ours. They're over, you know, they have more staff to deal with these things. So I don't think we should be spending our scarce resources to get out ahead of this project without Boston's participation. Never mind DCR and the T. I'm not sure those bridges, which are probably bridges that have roadways on them and may not even qualify, they may not be so relevant. But certainly in terms of the pedestrian bridges, I don't think it's even worth putting this on the warrant until we get some further feedback from the city of Boston about their
Right.
down the road.
No, I think your point of view is very interesting. I want to say one thing, which is that in the meeting that Jen had with, that Laura had with Jen Golson, Jen is of the opinion that they are permissible because, well, Laura, let me since you were the one who was there and heard it from the horse's mouth, let me ask you to repeat it, what Jen said.
Sure. So she also sent a memo that I'm happy to follow up with, but I think the gist of it is because we're not just thinking about them as recreational assets of, you know, part of a path in a park. They're also historic structures in and of themselves, that even the vehicular bridges would count as historic structures and would be eligible. And you would have to adhere to the Secretary of the Interior standards, but from what I understand from the DPW, they have to do that anyway in that area as a kind of historic area. So that didn't become quite the barrier. I don't think the barrier here is going to be necessarily eligibility. I think the barrier here is just sheer logistics of all the different players and ownership and coordination involved and expense and how that gets divvied up.
Just to add to that, when we're talking about funding regional efforts between towns or between municipalities, usually it's through a regional authority of some sort, like a regional school district. And we don't have anything like that here, which is another issue. If we're going to consider it to be a regional project, who would be the player? Who's the regional player? So I agree with Steve. Even by November, I think it's ambitious to have these issues
Right.
resolved.
Okay, the other
About
point I want to
regional
make,
players, there's DCR, but they seem to have, limited,
well, they have a one bridge.
Hmm.
Two bridges, as
Two.
far as I can tell, yeah. The other point I wanted to make, Steve, from what I heard from staff, is that they consider, and I'm not advocating this position at all, but just reporting to you that they consider that our putting the money forward for the bridges is the leverage. And if we take it away, we don't have the leverage. So there's sort of two opposing points of view. I don't know. I think it's hard to guess for me as far as I'm concerned, but I understand your point about, funding something that we're gonna just not put on the agenda in the end. We're not gonna have voted. We're gonna withdraw it.
maybe going ahead and doing this would help leverage Boston's participation in doing the work that follows. But why should we pay for the study of bridges, half of which are in Boston, just the study phase, unless we get reimbursed by Boston for that? So I understand Laura's staff's idea about losing leverage in a certain way, but I think, I think we need to get Boston on board with this. Not to
Are
mention,
they even going to respect a study that's financed by Brookline?
good point.
It's a
We have
shot.
no
It seems like a shot in the dark.
Nancy, a couple people
Yes.
have their hands up.
Okay, let me see. I don't see, I see Steve's.
I'll take mine down.
I do see Sean Lynn. Ordinarily, John, I don't take public comment during these times, but because of this is such a thorny issue and an open space one as well, I'll allow you to speak. Go ahead.
Let me make you a co-host, Sean. and
This
then
is a
you-
public hearing, right?
then
That's
you
Not
can-
yet, not yet,
Oh,
no.
not yet.
Yeah,
I see.
well, it is on the agenda.
It's on the agenda later. But go ahead.
That's right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I can't speak for town staff, and you've obviously had some conversations with them. But I did want to speak to one particular point. And I think it was David who might have said there is no regional authority or other body involved. And there is, sort of, and that's the Muddy River Maintenance and Management Oversight Committee. And I serve on that committee representing the Brookline Green Space Alliance. And it also brings together the DCR, Boston Parks and Open Space, Brookline, DPW, and a lot of other players. And we have a meeting scheduled for February. We've already had our January meeting. And I can raise this again and make it very clear what I'm hearing here, because I've raised this before. And I've gotten sort of an embarrassed reaction from the Boston participant in the MMOC. And with an, I'll get back to you. And I'll also point out that as part of those discussions, I think we generated a commitment for an additional $15,000 from the Emerald Necklace Conservancy in matching funds, which they mention in their letter of support as posted on the CPA committee's website and the meeting materials. I don't know how long that $15,000 stays on the table. I can't speak for the ENC. It is definitely there now, and it reflects this concern that this is Brookline only and not involving Boston. I could go on a long time about the complicated relationship between the Emerald Necklace Conservancy and the city of Boston, and the fact that the ENC is suing the city of Boston creates some tension there. The ENC may or may not be able to persuade the city of Boston, but other participants in the MMOC might be able to do this, and we can give it one more try. And I will emphasize this regardless of what you decide, that in order for this to move forward, it would really help if Boston showed some interest. They've
But
already
it's
said,
necessary. It's necessary.
they've already said they wouldn't use CPA funds for this, but they have other funds that they might be able to. And I'll also note, I don't have the list in front of me, the one bridge, the Longwood Avenue Bridge, which also goes over the Green Line, has the most complicated ownership. But in my opinion, it's probably the one least in need of assessment, precisely because so many other important players have a very strong interest in not seeing that bridge collapse. And then the DCR controls the culvert at the end of Leverett Pond, where the Muddy River goes underground, I believe. Everything else is either Brookline only or shared between Brookline and Boston out of the list. So it does narrow down the number of players a little bit. Sadly, that DCR culvert is one of the ones that shows the most evidence of deterioration, but it's by no means the only one. But that's just sort of background and where things are and what I've been hearing. As I said, we're getting sort of an embarrassed reaction from the city of Boston representatives at the MMOC, but not a commitment to put some money on the table.
Right. Well, perhaps the town administrator could come to a meeting of the group and persuade them to get on board and act as a regional entity for this project. That would be helpful.
Well,
And
the usual representatives are Alex Cassie and sometimes Aaron Shute. That would be helpful if either or both could attend and make this case.
right.
So-
When is that meeting, Sean?
I can't remember whether it's the second or the third Wednesday, probably the middle of February.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, Minnie?
No, I was just going to say, so everything that Sean said was, I think, like strengthened the case for just kind of pushing this a little bit, because, it really doesn't sound like the city of Boston is going to make a commitment to really share some of this. And if they don't share in the study, then what's
going to happen?
Yeah, what's going to happen further down the road? I mean, even if they said, okay, something like 50,000, 75,000, whatever. Even that 15,000, Sean, that you mentioned doesn't seem like it's truly a commitment, right?
Well, of course, the ENC is, not part of the city of Boston's government, but they are very interested in seeing this happen.
Yeah. And I know the staff doesn't want to parcel it out, but another strategic idea might be, strategy idea might be to, put the funding for the pedestrian bridges that are in Brookline, there are two of them, and as a good faith effort, we're willing to do our part, and we're going to take on some of this responsibility and make a plan and construct it and whatever. And that might also be a leverage in the sense that Boston would say, okay, well, they're serious about this. So rather than dropping the whole thing. Anyway, just throw that idea into the hopper. Sue, I think I saw your hand up, and then Clara.
I really think this is a project that's not, as Minnie says in her rubric, shovel ready. I mean, this is like so many random pieces that don't fit together, and there's so many potential problems. I think Steve's point about the leverage, I totally agree with. And I do think it's good that we're elevating this and drawing attention and putting a spotlight on the urgency of it. But I think it would be a mistake, given all the other considerations that we have before us that we'll get to in a minute, to even put this forward. I don't think it's ready. I think it's a proposal that has a lot of holes in it and a lot of question marks, and that we ought to be willing to say that.
Okay, Clara?
I thought the staff said they didn't want to do one or two of the bridges.
I know.
So they don't, right?
Yeah,
So,
and they're hoping to do the whole thing. They think it's more efficient. But the bottom line is, end line is, what if we never get commitments from these other places and they won't do the bridges?
but then
Then
let
we're
them-
letting our properties deteriorate without making a plan and going ahead. So I see two sides of it, if you know what I mean.
But since the staff would be the one that runs it, and Dave said to us, we don't want to do two, I think we're going to have to say no to some of these projects. We don't have enough money, right, for these projects. And so rather than say, and I don't think a lot of them will work and say, well, we're going to only give you 50% of what you want, or something like that. So, and maybe I'll get kicked off Parks and Recreation Commission for saying this, but I think maybe this is one we take off the list. And if they, and we can say, because we don't have control of the site, et cetera, and they can say, okay, next round, we're just going to put in for the bridges we own, and let them decide to do that. But if they've told us we don't want to do just part of it, I think we should listen to them and say, okay, we don't feel we can do all of it, so therefore we're going to say not this round. Not that it's not and I think we have to look at other projects, because it's my understanding, I mean, we can't just say take $10,000 off this project and $100,000. We're going to have to look at projects we're not going to fund, if I understand the math correctly.
Yeah, you're correct, Clara.
So would a more efficient use of our time to say, I've looked at all the, not I, but one of us has looked at, and I recommend we don't fund this, and we can discuss that. And someone can say, I recommend we don't fund this, and we can discuss that, because they're all worthy. And the question is, which one do we say not this time? Maybe we won't have. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay. Was anybody else?
I was just going to.
Oh, Steve, sorry.
That Clara said the staff was making, that doing 2 bridges only wouldn't be a very efficient way of doing this kind of study. And then, even then, where does the money come from to go on to the actual reconstruction work? So again, I think this is a project we should drop at this point. And I think we've articulated good reasons to push it down the road.
Minnie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Steve. I mean, just given this entire just unresolved kind of questions on the funding and the partnership and everything, I don't know whether this is ready for us to, for action this year. I mean, it just
Okay.
doesn't seem like it.
Okay, we haven't heard from Sam or Blair. Do you have any comments about this? Either of you?
I think the comments have been apropos, so nothing more to add.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think, there's a point to be made that the thing that might really motivate Boston to get their butts in gear is, identifying any critical structural issues through an analysis like this, but there's no guarantee that that will be, one of the findings, and that this will, yield any kind of commitment from them. So I think we should just be, if we push this off entirely, we should be kind of clear about our expectations for what we would want in terms of a commitment from Boston, whether it be like a financial commitment, cost sharing, et cetera, in advance of them submitting, another application for this kind of work. Because I think we sort of left that somewhat up in the air, despite saying that we did want some commitment.
Okay, well, the sense of the committee is very clear. I think we should, in this instance, have a motion because we're moving these projects forward or not. And I think we should have a motion and vote on it. So do I have a motion? Somebody want to move something?
So moved.
So seconded.
Okay, so Steve moves and David seconds a motion to not fund the Muddy River bridges at this point until some of the significant issues can be resolved. That's it, a satisfactory motion?
Yeah, I think we should mention that including some partnership in terms of funding from at least the city of Boston.
Okay.
Well,
we
Steve,
also-
we don't care where the funding. Now, what if Emerald Necklace Conservancy can fund their part? So I don't think we should pin it on, we should just say some matching funding, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody clear?
Mhm.
Okay, so let's vote. I'll call your name as I see you on the screen. Blair,
Aye.
Clara,
Aye.
David,
Aye. Aye.
Minnie. I don't hear you. You're
He's
muted,
muted.
Minnie. Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. Aye.
Okay, Sam,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Sue,
Aye.
and the chair will vote aye. So now we know we've taken that off the table, and we'll convey to the staff the reasons. And I still don't want to give up on this project. I, for one, think it's very, very worthy. And I would ask Laura to pursue the meeting with the town administrator. Clearly, this is going to take some time. It's not a 1, 2, 3.
But if we're gonna be optimistic and we're gonna be like pushing against,
Who's speaking?
Oh, that was Blair. He's muted now.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
background noise.
All right. So I would ask Laura to pursue the idea, of the meeting with the town administrator and maybe including Aaron and some of the other staff and members of this committee as well. Okay. So let's move on to the next agenda item, which is a report on the fiscal year 26 Amory Woods scope. Who wants to explain this? Laura? Clara?
I'm here. I thought it was spending money that we provided before to do more work in Amory Woods, which is adjacent to Halls Pond and Amory Park. And so their bids came in, their bids came in lower than they anticipated. So they want to spend some of the money to do more work in Amory Woods, which is parts of the path get flooded. And so they want to create a boardwalk the path in this walking system connects with Halls Pond walking system. And so they're not asking for more money, as I understand it. It's just to expand the scope that they had, because they had the scope that they wanted came in for less money. And Amory Woods, for all intents and purposes, feels very much like Halls Pond and connects to it. And so I would strongly urge everyone to please say okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. They want to, so the scope is not only in the warrant, but it's also listed in the grant agreement. So I don't believe we need town meetings approval for the scope. If they were asking for more money, that's a different question, but it's not. And so, and it also, this, as I understand it, the work that they want to do is very integral to the boardwalk and to its connection to Halls Pond. So I don't really see an issue with it. Does anyone else have an opinion about this? I see Minnie and then Steve.
So I had two questions. One was just completely clarifying that the scope is kind of within the scope of what we had outlined in the agreement, which is what, Nancy, it seems like you're saying. And the second is just like, what is the amount that we're talking about? You know, how much was the underspend? And then do you think that this additional project, kind of add-on project, will fully be funded by that, by the underspend, or is there a chance that they could run out of money? Like, do we know what the
Yeah,
numbers are? on
I can
that?
answer that. So I went on a sidewalk. I've seen the quotes from vendors and stuff for the expanded scope. So they've got solid quotes. And the issue with the memorandum of understanding is that it was actually written a little more narrow, I think, than I would advise in the future, because it was so targeted. It just was like Amory Woods Boardwalk. Well, it doesn't talk about how do you get ADA access to and from the boardwalk, you know, how do you keep it safe from trees on the boardwalk? And so the things that they want to do are, you know, making sure there's ADA accessible paths to the boardwalk, doing some slope adjacent to the boardwalk to keep it from eroding, doing some tree pruning and hazard mitigation along the boardwalk. So everything is very connected to the boardwalk, and would be covered within the original allocated amount of money per their quotes. There was one request about a post and rail fence that was like kind of across the driveway, and that I said, no, that's not, in my opinion, connected to the boardwalk and itself. That seems like it's related more to traffic control and things related to the park. And so, but for the specific line items, and then a site walk visit that I did was very helpful for me to see how it all fits together. So I think for me, it's more of a, and in discussion with the subgroup, they seem to feel that that's logically within the intent of the original grant, and it doesn't need any more funding. And that I felt that perhaps even this kind of thing could be handled administratively by staff, but I want to make sure that you all are informed, and then I get an okay, or you know, and that's kind of, you know, I don't know that it even needs a MOA change, but that's at your discretion if you'd like any language change.
Great. Thanks, Laura.
Nancy,
good with this.
you're muted.
Okay, some background noise here, and I didn't want you guys to suffer. Yeah, I think, yeah, one of the things that we, I guess, decide on is whether this is implied by the language and the project itself. You know, protecting from trees falling on the boardwalk, making sure that it's ADA accessible, et cetera. I mean, I don't think those things necessarily needed to be spelled out. I mean, they seem logical parts of the project. So I think none of our projects are telling us every single nail and, you know, exact things that they're doing. They're, you know, just basically giving us the outline of what's going to happen and what's going to result. So I think that this is perfectly appropriate. I don't have a problem with agreeing to it. I think maybe other committee members, I didn't want to make that decision, and other committee wanted to hear from other committee members about it. Steve, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, I was going to ask, I mean, my recollection is that there are boardwalks in Amory Woods. That was what the project was about. And I was going to ask whether this was more, but Laura sort of explained about how these are really kind of enhancements to the basic project that we can now manage to do. I also like her comment that maybe we are defining some of these projects too narrowly in these grant agreements, and might want to allow a little bit more flexibility, but I'm in support of doing this, allocating these leftover funds back into the project.
Any other comments, questions? So I think we should just go ahead and agree to it and, you know, I don't even think we need a vote. I think it can be just a consensus and move on. We're not asking for any money, so it has nothing to, it doesn't, we really don't have to go to town meeting over this.
Thank
Okay,
you.
if everybody's in agreement, then we're moving on. I don't hear any disagreement. Okay, so the next is the meat of the agenda, which is a deliberation on all of our 27 applications and funding availability. And we shared with you the chart that David had made last time, which showed that we had almost $3 million in requests and only 4,027,000 in revenue. So we know we have to cut. And I think what we should do at this point is Laura, so let me just say this. It seemed to me in thinking about it that we could decide they're all worthy, let's face it. And so one gets a 37 and one gets a 38. I mean, it's, the range is very, of the scores, I imagine, is pretty close with most of these. Not all of them, but most. And I'm wondering whether we can articulate, okay, shall we cut based on the projects and the rubrics? And if there's a 1 point difference in the scoring, do we discount that? Or should we, and when I think I saw an email from, I think it was David, who said, okay, maybe we ought to look at how we funded things in the past and what we should, how we want to balance the funding. And should we look at that? And I can't think if there was any other way. But I do think we need to know what the scoring was so we can see whether or not that leads us to any specific conclusions. Laura, did you receive the rubric from everyone finally in the end?
I have not received it from everyone. I do actually see that Brooke sent me something in a Google Drive just 2 minutes ago, so I haven't factored hers in yet, but I can share what I have.
Okay.
So this incorporates everybody that I have so far. Hopefully you're seeing that. So we have, so the ones I'm missing, we've got Burrington, Bachelor, there we go.
You're missing mine for sure.
Yes, yeah, I have Hyken, Heller.
Now the Heller one, maybe, I had that.
I'm missing Minnie. I've got David. And I'm missing.
Laura, remember that mine got renamed because I had a problem.
I copy pasted yours in from the renamed one.
Oh, you did, I see, okay.
Yep. So when we look at, this is how it comes out on a summary of scores, for better, for worse.
Okay, so looks like the highest is the United Parish. And the lowest is, well, looks like there's a tie. With,
I think the trust has 20.
Oh, the trust has 20. Okay, no, that's the lowest. Now, the thing about the trust is that the number has changed. So the original application is another complication. The original application was for $1 million, and it was very nonspecific. Just put the money into our hands and we'll spend it in a CPA eligible way. And so that's sort of what we were scoring on. But in the meantime, Brookline Community Development Corporation, we had entered into a grant agreement with them on their Boylston Street property to preserve the structure, restore the structure. But they had uncovered a lot of internal damage, which was not immediately apparent, and is costing another apparently $800,000. So they've applied to both the trust and CPA for that money. Now, we obviously are in the middle of a grant cycle, so we don't have that money to, just go ahead and give them. And the trust came up with the idea of splitting it 50-50. The original application from BCDC for this urgent money was, I think, 357 or 27,000, Laura. One of those two numbers. I don't have it in front of me.
Sorry, the original, oh, geez, for the BCDC project?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
in, it was about 800,000.
Right, with the two combined. But the point that David was raising were the extra funds between the, say, 350, if that's quite the number, to 400, were those on non-eligible CPA pieces. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that we ever got the answer to that. But anyway, so that's also one of the issues. But the Affordable Housing Trust said it would withdraw its $1 million request if we could fund the 400,000 for BCDC. And we're really not funding BCDC, we're funding the Affordable Housing Trust. The Affordable Housing Trust will front the money for the repairs, which they're expecting to be done by the end of March. And this money wouldn't come to the Affordable Housing Trust until July, because it has to be approved by town meeting, and then we'll have to have a grant agreement, et cetera. So the earliest it could be is July. So if you look in and you're saying, okay, this dollar is for this and this dollar is for that, our money is not actually, is reimbursing the HAB for them for the BCDC project, but we're not supposed to be reimbursing. So,
Could I put another spin on that, Nancy? Just clarify, since I'm the HAB representative to this committee, two things to keep in mind. I don't know whether people scored this at the point when the number for this request from the Affordable Housing Trust was $1 million, or whether they were already aware of the reduced ask to 400,000.
It was 400,000 on the form that we all used.
Yeah, that's true. I can see that. And so this may have gotten this low score even based on the 400,000. But just in terms of the way this is being structured, the Housing Advisory Board is planning to help BCDC get this project done. They're hoping to complete their construction by March or April, and they simply waiting until June for funds to do this work does not work. So the Housing Advisory Board is able to sort of get this money to them within the next month. The money that but the work that's being done at this Boylston Street project, at this point, under this funding strategy, it doesn't matter which elements of the project are CPA eligible or not.
Yeah.
Because the HAB is, and we don't have those same requirements. This is really an agreement that we're getting out ahead of this and taking care of this problem. And we're asking for a reduced, non-specific allocation to help restock the Affordable Housing Trust's funds for the next project of this type that comes along.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. What this is, the idea here is that HAB is going to go for the 800 and some thousand, and the CPA will make HAB whole at a 400,000 for another preservation project or projects in the future.
And let me
another
just
CPA eligible project, right? Right,
Yes,
David?
Yes,
Right.
CPA
These
preservation eligible projects, and the grant agreement will spell that out.
Right. These funds would have to be used on a CPA eligible project. And I also want to point out that with the additional information that we provided at David's request, most of the funds that we award to projects are leveraged by about a 10-to-1 factor. Maybe not these funds to BCDC for a project that's already underway, but they are in fact getting funding from 3 or 4 other sources, as well as, including the CPA, which funded the earlier phase of the project, and now, they're getting funds from CDBG, they're getting state funds, they have 4 or 5 other funding sources. So this may not be the same level of leverage that the HAB usually gets when we fund a project like the Two Life Communities Brown House on Harvard Street, but we still get leverage with.
Well, if you count all those other funding sources, the project is like a $2.5 million project. So it's maybe not 15-to-1 or 10-to-1, but it's still a decent multiplier.
Right. Thank you, Dave.
Okay, are there any other questions, concerns, et cetera?
Nancy, I had my
Okay,
hand up.
okay, I didn't see you. Laura, could you put down the chart so I can see everyone?
Let me just see where all my little controls went. Oh, there we go.
Okay, Sue.
Okay, I was going to make 2 points. One is sort of a procedural point, which is we introduced this by saying we're going to take a look at the scores as they came out, but that wouldn't necessarily be how we would go about making our decisions on what we were going to fund or not. And I think just looking at it for the minute that it was up on the screen, I really don't think that it would make any sense for us to just base it on the scores. Maybe it just gives us a sense of overall where the committee sort of came out on different projects. The other point I wanted to make was specific to the HAB request, which is, I think it was made pretty clear at our last meeting that the HAB is not going to fund the project without the commitment of CPA to forward fund at a later date. So it would be a shared project in that sense. So I think we should keep in mind when we make our decisions about what to fund, what to cut, what we can afford to do, that if we decide not to fund this, this is like basically saying that BCDC is not going to get the funds it's looking for from the HAB or from us.
I think the score would be better if there had been some kind of memorandum or something that explained the background for this and the reasons. And then we're really hearing that from Steve now, and it's, I think, quite compelling. And maybe if we had a kind of letter from HAB explaining all of that, it would have improved the score. So I'm not going to hang on the 20. We always said that the rubric scores are not the deciding factor. They're just a contributing to a decision. In this case, the situation has changed in the last few weeks, and I think what you're saying is right. We need to step up as we would like to do, and this is a better way to do it, a more efficient way to do it, in a way that gets the money to BCDC when they need it. And then that also means that HAB is going to have an earmarked set of money to continue to work on CPA preservation projects in the future. And I think that's also a benefit of doing this.
Okay, any other concerns or questions or whatever? No. Okay, so let's continue to discuss. So, there seems to be some strong sentiment for, recognizing that this 400,000 may be a very compelling expenditure.
It also relieves our situation in terms of not having enough money.
Well,
reducing
yes,
it by 600,000 is a big help in terms of getting to an amount of money that's within the scope.
I was going to say that. So instead of 6.3 in the hole now, we're in the hole for the difference between 4 and 5.7. So 1.7 is now, if we continue to keep this into the mix, then the 5.7 is what we need to shave off. So
How,
let's go.
Nancy, will
Oh,
you
so
say again?
Clara, yeah,
I'm sorry, can you tell me again, can you state the number we need to reduce our
okay, right now, if we take into consideration that the 400,000 is in the hopper, but that there's $1 million that came out of the hopper, so the difference between that is 600,000. And so I'm taking the 6.3 million in requests and reducing it to 5.7 million in requests. And, recognizing that we have $4 million in funding availability. So the difference between 5.7 and 4 million is $1.7 million that we need to find in terms of.
But
And there's
it's
another
actually a bit
200.
more than that now because we've taken out the Muddy River assessment.
No, that's true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's more like
Okay, so it's
1.5.
1.5 million then.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I just went into the rubric just to total up the, all the projects, and that was 6.3. And then if you take out 200 from Muddy River, that makes us 6.1. Now this is accounting for.
No,
that is
Minnie,
accounting for the 4.400.
Minnie, I'm sorry,
Yes.
that's not correct. We originally, when HAB had $1 million request in, the requests were 6.3. They reduced their request to 400,000, so that's saving us 600,000. So right away, it's 5.7 now in requests. Then we said, okay, the Muddy River is not ready for prime time, not shovel ready. We need to pull back on that. That's a $200,000 request. So that leaves us with $5.5 million in requests and $4 million in revenue.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So, I think we need the chart that you had up there before, Laura, so we can continue to go through and look and see whether, how we can satisfy this, $1.5 million overage.
What I was just sharing or the rubric?
Nancy, at the risk of being a bad guy, but also acknowledging that I am a housing advocate, I looked back over some of the projects. Certainly, I strongly support the housing projects. But a couple of the projects, when I went back and looked at them with the issue of how do we fund all this stuff, one that I feel that I'm concerned about is the Temple Sinai Steps. Yes, it's a worthy project, but I went back and looked at the three similar projects that we are, like one currently the United Parish project, but two previous ones, Ohabe Shalom and All Saints Church. And those two previous ones, Ohabe Shalom was a $1.9 million project. They asked for $800,000 in CPA funds. They, from other sources, a grant and their own capital campaign, came up with about $1.2 million in funding. So their match was 2.5 times the CPA funding match. All Saints asked for $1.1 million of CPA funds. They funded $1.7 million themselves for a total of 2.8. That was also about a 2.5 times match. The current United Parish. Yeah, sorry, David.
Yeah, but we ended up 800,000 for all
United
Saints.
Parish, yeah, All Saints.
Okay, so less, but United Parish is asking for 800. This is in the current round, is asking for $800,000. They have a $250,000 grant from a Sacred Places Foundation, and they are planning to raise the other $1,850,000 themselves. That's another large multiple of the CPA funds. Now we look at Temple Sinai. They're asking for $368,000. They're offering to put in, of that, $47,500. They note that there are 386 families in their congregation. That works out to about $120 per family that they're proposing to contribute. Now, it seems to me that if you look at their peers have done a lot more to help fund a project than what they're offering to do. In fact, if each of this may be a big ask, but if each of their 386 families put in $1,000, they could fund the entire project. Now, of course, they're not going to do that, but that's kind of the scale of things that we're talking about. So I feel that's a project where we could go back to them and say, look, this is how it's worked with some of your peer congregations. And I think that they ought to do more than simply ask us for pretty much, 90% of the budget. That's my opinion on that one.
Can I,
Okay,
Susan, I
Clara.
had my hands raised. Can I?
Yes. Clara.
I'm so glad Steve mentioned that because I actually went through their proposal very carefully. It seems that, and first of all, they've sort of grouped a lot of things that need repair, like cracked sidewalks to the kitchen entrance, the basement steps. And I agree that the main stairs and refurbishing the railings seem really important, but I think they've actually totally underestimated the cost of that. They have someone, I wasn't at the presentation if they had someone come and speak to the subgroup that was covering preservation, but it seems like they say the person who's going to be working on it, he's not an architect or preservation specialist, but he's run projects like this, and it seems to me it's not really, they don't have I don't see if they have drawings. I didn't see allusion, because you have to have drawings that they get cost on, and then they'll have to do shop drawings, and someone will have to review the shop drawings. So and then they have all these little things. So I agree with Steve that they haven't raised enough of their own funds, but it also seems they haven't really thought out the project well enough, and that it's going to cost a lot more than they think it is. Replacing all those steps with granite surprised me that their cost was as low as it was, because they're going to have to rebuild the foundation, put the concrete, put the granite on. So I was a little surprised by that. So I'm
Okay.
agreeing with Steve that this would be a good one to say. They haven't funded enough, and I would also say they haven't done enough drawings and research to justify the
Their
cost
application
estimate.
isn't specific enough, is what you're,
Doesn't have enough detail. Yep.
right, yeah. Sue,
Okay. Well,
Go
I
ahead.
heard David trying to speak, but David, the
Yeah.
chair called on me, so I'm going to speak.
I'm agreeing with Clara.
Okay, great. I'm agreeing with Clara, and I also was underwhelmed by the presentation that we heard at the subcommittee meeting, or maybe it was our full meeting. I can't even remember anymore. But it seemed that not even all the restoration was to the sort of the original. It was some intermediate state of I don't know. I guess whatever it is that was in place. So it didn't seem to really fit what they were billing it as. So I do agree with the previous speakers. Unless there's other people that want to speak on that, I was ready to speak on a different project.
Well, let's finish this one first, if you don't
Okay.
mind, Sue, okay?
Sure.
Did anybody else have any questions or concerns? Okay, so the question is, has been raised by Steve and Clara and David, shall we push this project forward, or shall we say to the applicant, this is a worthy idea, but we don't believe there's enough specificity here and detail, and we're concerned about the level of funding of matching funds that you're proposing. And we'd like to see you come back with a better application next year. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Excellent.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so let's vote. Blair? We
Aye.
don't. Okay.
Aye, sorry.
Clara?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Minnie?
I,
Sam?
I
Steve?
Aye.
Sue?
Aye.
Okay, and the chair's going to abstain. As I've told you before, I'm a member of that congregation. And just to avoid any impropriety, I'm going to, or conflict of interest, I should say, I'm going to abstain. So, but the motion passes. And Laura, will you convey that to the applicant? And tell them that we look forward to a more honed proposal next year. Okay, so, we have, so that means, we've taken out another 300 and, remind me of the exact number?
270.
300 and,
269,950.
I can't hear you.
269,950.
Okay, all right, let's for ease of,
200, yeah.
270,000,
So-
right?
Yeah, so
Okay,
put up there your spreadsheet again, Laura, so we
yeah.
can keep
Yes.
track.
And may I say, I have one other project on my hit list.
Whoa,
No, we're not yet.
wait,
Let-
wait,
Okay.
wait a minute, I have one too.
Yeah, everybody has one, and so,
Okay,
you know, I
we're-
have one also,
We
so,
still have a gap of 1.2-ish. So that's where we're at. 1.2.
1.3 looked to me like.
Yes, 1.3. That's correct.
Okay, 1.3. Okay. Wait a minute. We were at 5.5.
Yeah,
How,
I zeroed out Muddy River and I zeroed out Temple Sinai.
okay. And did you reduce,
Housing Trust says 400.
yeah, okay. I don't know why it came out to be, but I guess their math is right.
Yeah. We
Yeah,
totally-
okay.
And so then I have this as our income, right?
Wasn't I thought our income was 4 million. No, you're looking at next year's income or the current year's income. I think it's the income we're looking to spend is the income, the 4072345.
Oh.
That's the amount that we're spending this year. As I've said before, we're
So
lucky.
it's not the 3.7.
Yeah, we're lucky that we can do that because, you know, when you fund something that you don't have and then you don't come up with as much as you
Oh, I
need.
know what I was grabbing.
have to have
Grabbing
something-
This one, the estimated 2026 one.
Yeah, it's the 4072345. You know, just explain again to the committee for people who haven't heard this, you know, if we keep funding the money we know we have, we never have to do this awkward procedure called a true up. Because if we award money and then we don't have it in the end, we have to account for it somehow. And that's some kind of it's called a true up. We had to do it once. And it's not a great procedure. So we would rather be in the position we are. So now we're down to 1.15 million. Okay. Okay, so everybody's gonna have a hit list here and
Already had one, so I'll wait.
okay, thank you.
So,
Yeah, you get
And I was just, no hit list or anything, but I was just going to ask for like background context, which is, you know, so far, do we have, you know, how much has the CPA funded in the different categories? And I don't know whether Laura, you have that handy.
that's in that chart. Could you go back to that chart,
Yeah.
Laura? Okay, so here's that chart with the
Okay.
amounts that we have funded. So the percentages for, if you add up the percentages for fiscal year 25 and 26, you can see we've had 18% historic preservation, open space and recreation, 26%, community housing, 50%. Now, I don't know, I think the fiscal year 25, 26, and 27 percentages may have changed as a result of some of these things. So, but I think they're relatively similar. But you know, is certainly the housing is up in the high 50s and the others are in the low 20s. It's basically, I don't know whether whether we can change that on the fly here. But
It's in the formula. These are the current numbers.
oh, okay, so 18, 26, and 56 are the fiscal year 25 and 26 numbers. So if we funded everything in this year that we set out to, we would have those three numbers. Now,
Right. That's-
the
that's-
57% includes the 600,000 taken out of the HAB
No, it
application, David?
includes the 400,000.
Okay, only the
So it's
400,
been-
great.
The housing's been reduced by
Okay,
600,000.
okay, fantastic. Okay, and we reduced the historic preservation and open space because we had that, the Muddy Rivers were split between those. So those are pretty even. They're at 22 and 21, and the housing is at 57. So when you look at it that way, you realize that perhaps we should be looking to the housing ones so we can even the score, because we want the score to be more even by the end of the 5-year period. So let's look at that as a possibility. The housing, can you go back to the housing? There's 3 applications for housing money, 400,000 for the Affordable Housing Trust, 1.1 million for the Trustman roof replacement, and 1.556 for the windows at High Street. Now, I did earlier on, I had talked to Ben Stone about doing what we did on Egmont Street, which was to fund a $500,000 roof and then another $500,000 roof. And we ended up with greater match than they had expected. So we never had to kick in the third 500,000. So that his response, and that's certainly logical, was that it was a much better project to do the whole thing rather than partial. And he would rather, if he had to give up something, he would rather give up the windows and put that off. So, the question, one of those projects would take care of the problem, basically. And it would also get us to a more favorable position of evenness in the funding. So that's a possibility. Sue.
Okay, so I have a couple of things to say. First of all, my original intention when I raised my hand a while ago was to identify other projects that we might consider not funding. And the hope being, in my mind, given that I'm the housing advocate here, or the BHA's advocate, is that by the time we got back to considering all the housing projects, maybe we would have made enough cuts in other areas. But one of the things that you just said is a presumption, and it may be that the committee agrees with you, but maybe they don't, is that we should be balancing it out over the 5 years. And there's just nothing in our plan that requires us to do it. And there's some evidence that that was never the intention. So that I want to put in a suggestion that we first look at other projects that are outside of housing. And one of my reasons being that there's real live people that live in this housing, and they're dealing with leaky windows, leaky roofs, poor conditions. Nancy, you've spoken eloquently a number of times at our earlier meetings about how distressing it was to walk through some of the apartments that needed the repairs and that had all of that deferred because there's just not enough money in the system. And so the CPA is really a wonderful resource that has generously supported our housing and public housing and other housing. And we're very grateful for that. But at the same token, I don't think we want to abandon people now and ask them to wait and have leaky windows and leaky roofs. So what I was going to originally speak to was a proposal on the cemeteries. Now I understand that would, if we didn't fund the cemeteries, that would result in sort of a swing towards housing in terms of the percentages. But since we're not obliged to do that, I really want people to think about this particular project. For one thing, 865,398, at least that's the number that I have in my notes, is a lot of money. So if we decided not to go forward with that project, it would make a big dent right away in what our gap is. So there's that. Then there's the other, which is the first half of the project was done like 10 years ago, like 2016, something like that. And there's nobody living there. That yes, I understand there's a true value, and I appreciate it, to preserving the historic nature of the cemetery. But if we can't do that, if we can't fund everybody, is what I'm saying, then I vote for living people over dead people. And I would ask the committee to really consider whether it's really that urgent that this year that we fund a project that's asking for that amount of money to do a restoration that's already not happened for 10 years. And why can't they wait till next year or the year after that? So that's my point right now, is to consider doing some other cuts before we come back to the housing. And that it's not, it's not ideal to ask one of our projects to wait. Obviously, if we don't get the money, we don't get the money. We have to work with that. But I'm asking you to consider the impact it's going to have on our residents.
Clara.
Hi. Sue, I would like to just say a couple things. It's not really for the dead. That cemetery is a recreation area. It provides open space. People walk there. People enjoy nature there. So I think we are, and it's my understanding by the application that the tombs or I forget exactly what crypt, that they create a hazard. If they don't create a hazard, I am really going to get kicked off recreation and parks. I mean, and is there something they could do that's less than 800,000 that maybe makes the place safe, but maybe doesn't restore the crypts? So I don't totally disagree with you, but I do want you to understand that we're not doing this for the dead people. We are doing it for the living, to have open space and recreation and a place to walk. And I would rather go back and say, is there a different way you can do it that maybe doesn't preserve the crypts, but makes them safe for the people to use the open space. And maybe they can cut the ask in half. And I don't know if we have time to do that, but I do.
Probably not.
But I do want to make that a safe, enjoyable, open space property for the people and they take school children there. So I would like to stress it's not for the dead, it's for the living, and perhaps they could do in a way that was less expensive.
Thank you, Clara. I want to make one a remark about this whole thing. About Sue says that we're under no obligation to fund anything by any percentage, except but the law basically says, okay, 10% for each, but we're still going to keep all three on the table. And not only that, we're going to combine open space and recreation so that effectively they're a stepchild of the process. So, I think our plan was based on the fact that the categories came out pretty evenly. Open space was first in priorities among the people who responded, and it's a subjective, there's no question about that. I'm not saying this is an objective standard, it's not. And housing was next and historic preservation was next. But my belief about the CPA and having been involved in the failed 2006 effort to get the CPA on the ballot, and then knowing about the 2021 effort, which succeeded, it reduced the percentage. It promised the voters to be even-handed about the funding, and in the three different categories. And some of the, Sue's right. I mean, we are dealing with people, and it's very important. But unfortunately, CPA cannot rescue the system the way, and every single need of every single person. And if we were going to do that, we would devote all the money to low-income families because the need is so immense. But we do have an obligation to include open space and housing, and I believe that obligation should be relatively equal. I don't say it has to be exactly equal, but I think right now it is very skewed. There's another thing Sue said, which I want to remark on, which was that, when I saw in 10 or 12 years ago, whatever it was, how appalling some of the conditions were, those were conditions inside inside the building, inside the apartments. And no, CPA is not, we're not allowed to renovate apartments and units that have not been created by CPA. So we're not talking about renovations inside. We're only talking about preservation of the building and the outside and the windows. It's all very important, and it's very important to how the people live. I was disappointed that the BHA hasn't used the technique of the 3M plastic things on the windows. I know they're costly, and I know they don't have enough staff, etc. But it is a temporary solution, and it's way better than nothing. So I know that some of the units have had that, but at any rate, my overall point is that we do need to be mindful, in my view, and not spend in a skewed way all the money. It's not that much money to begin with, and the needs of recreation, of open space, of historic preservation, people will tell you, the people who are advocating for those will tell you that they're, very important, and we should be funding them. And the statute basically lays out a scheme for doing that. So I don't think we should flaunt that notion. I think that we should be prepared and to spend it in a way that respects what the voters expected of us. I think that's basically what this exercise would do, is, all right, we've spent considerable amount on housing, and we intended to do it, and I'm happy we did it because we spent 3.75 million, and that's skewing the number. But it was worth it. I mean, because we're gonna get a bunch of new units, and that's a really, really important project to the town and to tenants who live in the town. And now we've done some other projects that are also very, very worthy. But I think we have to look at the numbers and say, okay, it is a bit skewed, and we need to make some correction for that. That's just my view, my own view. Somebody else had their, David, I think you have your hand.
Yeah. I just
You got a
wanted,
paper in front of you.
I think, I just wanted to, in the spirit of Minnie's questions, we mentioned the 10% obligations. Currently, we have 825,000 in our open space reserve, and that'll increase by about 330,000 with this year. In historic preservation, we have 485,000, and that'll also be increasing by another 330. And in the community housing, we have 405,000. and then you can add 330 to that. So that's where we stand with our obligations. With open space, it's more than $1 million. And even with all the requests that are on the table, it'll still be substantial. And historic preservation, a good portion of what they're asking for, will also spend down that reserve, that obligation. The 700,000 for housing isn't enough to meet the requests we have. So that's sort of where we're standing on that.
Okay, well, I think that sort of buttresses the point also that we have to make sure, given that we're obligated to spend 10% in each of the categories that we do that. And we do have some that we haven't spent in the past years, so that's why David says we have those in reserve. So we've always spent everything we had in housing, but we have not always spent everything we have in open space and recreation and historic preservation. So that is another way of looking at it. I think Blair had his hand. So I see Sam and Blair. Okay, Sam, you go first. I see you first. So
All right.
go ahead.
No rush. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I do think, in many cases we get a lot of value cumulatively out of what we spend on housing because of how it's leveraged, which is not the case in some of the other categories. So that's something to take into consideration. And I appreciate, that we're addressing acute problems for real life people. So, I'm sympathetic to that. But the one thing I wanted to clarify was, I think it was the Trustman roof replacement request that noted that they're assuming a relatively modest match in their funding request relative to kind of what sometimes is the maximum match. So it was, I think, 150% versus 250%.
Correct. Yeah.
1.5% versus 2.5%.
Yeah. And maybe there was some indication that the match might not be quite as high as it has been previously, but I was sort of curious if we need to reduce, in the end, kind of, we cut down and have $300,000 or $400,000 left to go, if that might still be viable in its like totality as a project, if we did reduce, that allocation somewhat. I guess that's a question for the housing folks.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Well, we're assuming a very conservative match in what they're asking for. So there is still like a reasonable possibility that if we reduced our contribution to $800,000 or something along those lines, they could leverage that to achieve the total funding that they're asking for.
Or
that the total project cost.
I do think that's a good point. And Ben is here, so he can speak more specifically to that, if that's okay.
All right,
Nancy,
Ben.
Nancy, can I just interrupt?
Yeah, Blair.
I have to be at the EDAB meeting, which is at 7, so I have to apologize to Dr. Bell out here. Thank you for understanding.
Yeah, okay. I've got to take this call. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good question, Sam. So the program, does match up to 2.5 times. When we wrote this application in October, they had actually been. Sorry, my children are yelling. Let me move to a different.
Okay, I think what Ben was about to say.
Sorry, I'm back.
You're back.
Okay. My children. At the time we wrote the application in October, HLC had been slow walking our matches, like approving a match for both our most recent CPA and CDBG awards. They ended up after around, I think in late November, coming through with the full 2.5 times match for both projects. But we don't know. Brookline, because of the great generosity of the CPA, CDBG, and HAB, has pulled down a lot more of this HILAP funds than pretty much any other housing authority. So there's always the danger that if they have too many applications, they won't be able to fully fund. But so far, they have been fully funding. So it's sort of a question: do you leave the project at risk of not being able to complete the full scope, or do you, bank on the full leverage? So that's sort of up to the committee, I'd say.
Ben, I understand that by sort of max funding from a CPA match, it improves the chance of getting a good match for the rest. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Well, they like to, they theoretically not having to do the full 2.5 makes the project more attractive to the state because everybody wants more bang, but Brookline and the state both want more bang for their respective bucks. But as I said, our most recent awards did receive the full match, which is letting us do the Egmont roofs in one go, which is more efficient.
So, but I think,
But
David, you're right.
we don't know what's going to happen going forward. We are asking for quite a bit of match.
So because it's a multiple of the amount that the municipality offers, the more we put in, meaning Brookline, the more the potential match is. So that is correct, David, if I understood you correctly.
But if we put in enough so that the project can be done with just a 150% match, are we potentially, over subsidizing the project if the total budget could be accomplished with less from Brookline and a 2.5 times match, as you've been fortunate to receive in the past? It's sort of like, it's kind of like a gamble. I'm not sure, I don't know what the right thing to do is, honestly.
Yeah, it's a conundrum. So Ben, how much would it cost to, say, do half the roofs?
Yeah. Well, it would be about half. I would say that Trustman is 3 buildings, right next, all right, kind of on top of each other in a tight site. I don't want to give anything up. I will say just mechanically, if you're trying to not fully fund a project, the windows would be probably easier to phase because you would do windows on a certain number of buildings. Whereas the Trustman roofs, if they'd have to mobilize, they got to bring the cranes out. I think that, possible to phase would be more inefficient to phase than
Right.
the other project.
Right, which is the reason you said that to me earlier, correct?
But both would be more efficient to do all in one go. I just think you'd get hit just because of the mechanics of roofs. And
So
you're trying to say something.
So I think one of the ways to go, because I could see the writing on the wall here, is to say, like, fully fund the roofs because we need to be able to do them efficiently and not waste money from the Housing Authority or the CPAC. But the windows, which Ben is saying, could be more easily phased. Maybe if you wanted to cut that back, do half that, and hope that the match comes through so that we could do more.
So are you saying like modify the request for the High Street windows to a number that with a 2.5 match would enable the project to be fully funded? I'm not sure how much that would reduce.
It would
No, I
reduce it by
actually.
400,000. But yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I
Ben.
didn't mean to jump in. Yeah, Judge, just answer the math question. If you assumed a same total development cost, but a 2.5 match rather than 1.5 for the High Street Fest windows alone, that takes you down from I just did this math a second ago, 1.556 to 1.11.
So you said.
So how would that look, Laura?
Yeah, that is a question.
I don't think it gets us there, but yeah, I'm
No.
sorry.
Well, I think if in theory we did that and just for sake of argument, we removed the old burying ground, that together is just over 1.2 million, which would get us
But
there.
on the other hand, if we
think-
remove the entire, windows and put it off till next year, then we would accomplish, I think, a lot of things, not keeping the fund, getting the funding to more relatively even method. And, I understand, I totally agree that people's lives are, affected here. But, there are people who use these other facilities too. And I think it's really important to stick to our mission of supporting all three. So, all 3 areas. So if we were to cut out the roof, the windows, what will we be left with?
Nancy, before you do that, did
I
you
just
do
want to
the-
see, I just want to see, Clara. Okay, so we would be, we would still have a problem, a $400,000 problem.
No, you're in the black.
No, we're in the black.
No, we're in the black, okay. Well, that's better.
So
So that means
Can
we
I
could,
just ask you if you went down to a 1.5 match instead of 2.5? What do we say for just the two, and then they can come back if they don't get the, if they don't get the larger match, or they could come back to CPA.
And the roofs, you mean, Clara?
I thought on both of them, I thought on the match was for both
No.
projects. Or is it just,
That they
Well, they're
both
assuming
are
a
eligible.
1.5 match on both projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're separate projects. I think
They're
we have to look
separate.
at them separately. And I think, Ben, I don't know, Ben has a good point, that, to do the roofs, and that they sound more urgent, to do the roofs, piecemeal is a greater problem. So, we should, his preference, and I think we should respect the applicant's preference here, is that doing the roof replacement is more urgent.
it's,
Uh,
the key is the mobilization of cranes. You don't want to have to do that twice.
Right.
but on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
windows, didn't Ben also say you could stage the windows, so you could ask
Yeah.
for half the windows this year and half
Right.
the
Yeah,
windows
I
so
next
think
year?
that is what,
High Street Fence is 7 buildings, so theoretically you could do as many buildings as the funding, whatever funding we receive allows. Trustman, theoretically you could do one roof, but I think that's, as the reasons I said, that makes a lot less sense. Or just to give you a little bit of color, just on the Egmont roofs, which we're really excited about being able to do all at once. We're already having discussions like, where do we put the stuff on this tight site? Do we put it on the roofs? Do we move parking spaces around? I think that's less of a concern at High Street Vets, just because it's more of this multi-building campus.
Right. Okay, so if we did, say we did 60% of the windows, what would that be?
660,000, right?
Yeah, okay. And then where would our number be in? We'd be in the black a tiny
think-
bit?
No,
No, we'd be in the, on the whole, in the,
I think it's closer to 400,000, right? That 398. Laura, can you just put in 398 and see what that looks like?
All right.
put it where, Minnie?
98 for
Oh, in the
windows.
windows, instead of 660, just for the math, yeah.
Okay, you got it. Thank you, Minnie.
Okay, so then that leaves us with $317.
I'd
Okay.
like to get back to,
Give,
I think we're.
No,
Wait,
done.
Steve, please wait.
Okay,
Okay, so if we did the windows, if we with 398, and you got a 2.5%,
2.5
2 point,
multiplier.
Matt, yeah, however you say it, I'm sorry, I'm getting punchy here. Then would you have enough to do at least half the windows? Ben, I'm asking you that.
Yeah, I think, what was that number again? Sorry.
398,000.
No, well, even a 2.5 times match, that gets you to 1. No, it's not. That would be a little less than half the windows based off that.
But okay,
Right, because
Uh,
398,000 times
But I think what we
a
are
million,
saying,
1.4 would be a little, yeah, still a little less than half of the total development cost.
But then-
But that would let you do maybe 3 buildings if our costs are correct.
what if you had the 2.5 match, the full
Well,
match?
2.5 match, so it's 398,000. 2.5 times that is 1 million, which is plus that is 1.4 million, which is
Yeah.
less than half of 3.9 million.
what if
Right. I
we,
was just trying to do math in my head really quick, but I think that's right. Yeah.
what if we reduced our contribution to a number that with a 2.5 match would enable you to do the whole project?
That would be 1.1 million.
And that's, what kind of reduction is that?
That's a 400,000 roughly reduction.
Okay. I'd
440.
think about doing it that way, and if you're lucky, then you're good. And that's still, that takes another 400,000 off, but I think we have a couple of other projects to look at before we say we're done in terms of, I'd like to go back to the discussion of the cemetery because I want to explore some of what Clara was suggesting. But I can defer that until we're done with this housing.
Well, let's see if we've got this straight now. So right now, if we funded 398,000 and they got the full 2.5% match, they would get $1.1 million on a $390,000 project. So that would take about 3 of the buildings, correct? And then when we may, this may be something we have to fund in stages. We just don't have the money to fund everything, but that's one possibility.
So Nancy, I don't understand. What are you saying?
Well,
Are
I'm
we
just,
funding
I'm trying to
60%?
explore, yeah. And then the look at you can see the percentages go down. So that in terms of what we're doing here, the percentages do go down to make them a little more compatible with our mission. I'm going to call it that. So I think that's one way to go. I think somebody else, okay, Steve, sorry, Laura, unless there are other questions about the chart at this point, and I don't see your hand, so you'd have to speak up. Okay, she put the chart down and we can continue the discussion. Sorry, I can't seem to do both at the same time. So,
Nancy, can you
Yeah.
just summarize what I lost you there. So the windows, what's on the chart for the windows now?
well, the windows would be 398,000
Which will,
rather than the 1.1 million. And the hope is that with the BHA would get, a much more match than they're conservatively estimating. And then we could review that next year and see how much more money would be necessary if they do get the greater match. So that's one option. The other option is to, cut out the whole thing and say, okay, come back to us next year. And we hopefully will be able in a better position, although I don't think we will be, we'll be in a worse position next year, but at least according to the numbers now. So I don't know. It's going to be we always knew this is going to be difficult. I agree with Clara that cutting the burial ground is not a great idea. There's some safety issues there, and with children in that area, it's not. It is passive recreation. Kids are walking around. They're probably learning some history lessons as well about the people who were buried there. So I don't know that. I'm not a fan of doing that. I think it's and they're asking relatively for a lot less money.
so keeping some windows in the mix here, how much more do we have to cut now?
No, we're
I
in
don't
the
think-
black.
Thing.
We're in the
We're in the
black.
by
Yeah.
$317.
And we
And-
can put that 317 into the windows to make it 398,
That'll maybe one more
300.
window.
Yeah,
And we have funded some of the windows, correct?
Yeah.
correct.
40%, 60%?
I'd say it's 400,000 over 1 million and a third. So about a
Yeah.
third.
It's 1.5 million for the current request.
Oh, the current because 1.5.
1.55.
Okay, so it's less than 30%. But we don't know, Clara, because we don't know whether the match will come in better.
Yeah,
And we could fund
one
less.
just math note. I was looking at this there based on our numbers. It's just very early estimates. It's the cost, and the buildings are slightly different sizes at High Street Vets, but forgetting all that, it's $557,000 per building. So 3 buildings is 1.67 million. And if you assume a 2.5 times match, that's I think $470,000 necessary to leverage enough to do 3 buildings. Now it's not exact because the buildings have different numbers of windows. I'd have to go back and like look and count windows. Sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head. But using the divide by 7 math, that's what you get to. 398 is not quite enough to do 3 buildings with that math, but it's close. Sorry to interject. Just wanted to give that clarity.
Thank you. So can we vote on that proposal? What's on the boards now? What you- or do you
Sure.
want-
Before we do that, I wanted to get back to the cemetery and Clara's idea of doing something that would at least address any current safety concerns. I also like when Nancy mentioned, people wandering through that cemetery might learn some history lessons about some of the people who are buried there. I remember asking when this project was first proposed whether the cemetery trustees had ever considered reaching out to the families, assuming that there are some descendants of those people from whatever 200 years ago. I know this is a town project. We don't really expect matches from town projects.
Steve, I'm just remembering something. I had a conversation at one point with a friend of mine who is, or someone I know, who is on the Friends, and she said that there weren't any relatives, and that the Friends group itself is not even composed of relatives. So I think that's probably,
Okay.
I can confirm that, but I think that's probably correct.
That's too bad. If I just found one,
Sorry.
one
Sorry to
scion
dash your
that-
hopes.
that the
They did
trust
state
fund-
that, Nancy. They did in that presentation. That was
Yeah, I
asked.
think that's
And they
right.
said,
I
Ann
asked,
Cole
okay,
stated
and
that, yeah.
answered.
Mm.
Okay.
no
Right.
people.
But what about Clara's idea of having them rethink this and addressing safety concerns and phasing whatever additional work they need to do there? Because that's another
Well,
big chunk.
Again, yeah, I don't know that we have the time for that, Steve. So either we say no cemetery and yes to the windows, or a portion of the windows. How much is a cemetery again? I don't think it's enough.
800 and some
Yeah.
$1,000.
865, 866.
Yeah, so I don't think that's an option. I think that we're asking that it's in essence the town that is doing that project, and I think we have enough specificity to know that it needs to be done, and I don't know.
Okay, well,
at some
that's
point you can only twist a pretzel so many ways. So.
If the housing authority is comfortable with what we're talking about and that sort of gets us to the black, then maybe we should quit while we're ahead.
Well, I feel very torn because I do want to be cooperative and I do recognize the value of the other types of proposals. So I don't want anyone to think that because I'm advocating for our proposals that I don't value the proposals in the other categories because I do. But it does seem that there's a good idea that Steve has just spoken to and that Clara originally raised. And it seems to me that it would have been worthwhile to give that a little deeper consideration. But that said, we're grateful for what we can get from the CPAC. And I don't want to stand in the way of that or the resolution of our business.
Well, the other possibility is that if the Trustman roof match comes in higher and they don't need as much money from the CPA, we can all keep our fingers crossed, that money could go into another BHA project.
Well, that's actually a great idea, Nancy.
But I don't know that
but-
we can bind, I'm saying that, and if I'm on the committee, I would vote that way, but I can't, I don't know that we can bind another committee in that way, but that's an idea forward for us to consider and think about. And, I would hope that the state would come up with more funding as they did with the Egmont roofs,
But we could specify that if they get the higher match for the Trustman roofs, that any any available funds from the CPA could be moved over to the.
Could be,
Street
yes,
project.
that's the operative word, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I think it's important for us to clarify that in any warrant article. I don't know exactly how it would be drafted.
That would be done in the memo of agreement, Sue.
Okay, as long as you're comfortable with that, because I don't
I think,
wanna-
Laura, can we do that?
Yes, although it's, I mean, I. probably
Again,
have to
I,
get
not,
some
not, not
council to weigh
affirm, we
in on
would
whether or
do
not you
this,
need
but
to do it
we
in the
could
warrant
do
or not,
this.
too.
Yeah.
Wait, two people talking, I couldn't hear either one of you. I don't know what Laura said.
Yeah, certainly you can stipulate that in a memorandum of agreement or a grant agreement, but I would want town council's feedback on whether or not to also put it in the warrant in a particular way.
Couldn't it be a whereas clause? Whereas if there's extra money, the CPA could strongly consider, or, doing
Yeah,
something.
I think
something like
I
that.
would rather have it in than not have it in and learn later that you need it.
Yeah, all right,
But
okay. At any rate, okay, so let's move this forward. Shall we vote to make the window replacement at High Street $328,317? And then we will have balanced, quote unquote, the budget.
all right, 1 second. So we're at 398.
Oh, 398, 317, sorry,
317?
yeah.
All right. Okay, now the 317. There we go.
Is it just me or does the video seems off? It could be me.
It's off a little bit, but, okay, I think that came out to a zero. Yeah, we're spending every dollar. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so we're spending 4,072,000 and some change. I forgot what the change is, on our request this year. The housing, let me just summarize, the HAB request is reduced to 400,000. The Windows request is reduced to 398,000.
17.
317, 398, 317. And the Temple Sinai request is denied at this point for lack of specificity, and I think they also must focus on historic. I'm not convinced that all of that proposal is for preservation, and that's just a CPA rule. So, I think repairing a crack in the sidewalk is maybe not something we can do anyway.
And I think we also need to remind them that their peer congregations came up with a much larger
Match. Yeah.
funds.
Okay. So if we do those, if we take those steps, then we will have
And
balance.
not funding the bridges, Nancy.
And right, and not funding the bridges. This year, we have to work on all of the attendant problems in order to get the bridges funded in a different year. So that's 4 steps actually, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, 4,072, 345, and that's what we want to spend, and that's what we would be spending if we do these things. Okay, it's now 7:30, and we only have a couple of other, well, we could do a public hearing and possible vote on this warrant article as we have it now. And then meet, I don't know what we would meet on next week, but we, I have to consider it and see if we still need a meeting next week. Maybe we don't, maybe we're finished for the warrant article period anyway.
But don't we have to have a public meeting?
Yeah, I'm
to-
gonna call the public hearing right now.
Oh.
We did a deliberation. Now we have to have a public hearing. So I'm going to open this up and call for a public hearing on the issue of what the CPA warrant article will contain in the 2026 annual town meeting. All right, anybody want to make some comments about in the public hearing? Okay,
Sean?
Sean
Sean has-
Lynn Jones, yes.
Thank you. I'm Sean Lynn Jones, president of the Brookline Green Space Alliance, town meeting member from Precinct 1, and a resident of 53 Monmouth Street, which will actually matter more than it usually does when I get to the point. I think you've already moved in the direction of not reducing funding for the old burying ground. And I can't speak as eloquently on behalf of that application as Ann Coles or say Jesse Waisner or Aaron Kramer from the town, who were very much involved in it. But I did want to point out just a couple of things. Obviously, one justification for going ahead with this project is improving safety. But there's another one, and that is the general tendency for vandalism to be reduced when you actually maintain a property. And you probably read a lot of stories, they come up every now and again, of people vandalizing cemeteries. They're tempting targets. But if you maintain a property, not only do you avoid long run, even higher costs, but it tends to give people the idea that this is a respected, well-maintained property and deters vandalism. I mean, some people refer to this as the broken windows theory, and that's kind of gotten the bad name because it got associated with stop and frisk in New York City. But there really was something to that. If you let a property get run down and fall apart, people think it's fair game, kick those tombstones over and so on. And full disclosure, one of my professors at Harvard was James Q. Wilson, who actually did propound that broken windows theory. I didn't agree with him on anything else. He was an arch conservative, and he wanted me to be his research assistant, and I foolhardily said no. I should have, because he really was a brilliant and well-known political scientist. But there is something to that. There's also, I think, an important point here about historical preservation and remembering the past. You probably all heard the quip, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. You may not know that was said by a Brookline resident, a Monmouth Street resident, in fact, George Santayana. People don't remember that, but it's true. And I know that the old burying ground, the Friends of the Old Burying Ground, have been very actively supporting the idea of preserving and publicizing the old burying ground, because enslaved people were buried there, and they've commissioned a large report on that. And that's an important part of their mission, and I think it dovetails very nicely with actually restoring the burying ground. So I'm sure Ann Coles or one of the town staff would have said this much better than I did, but I do hope that that money is retained going forward. And I also just like to point out generally that in terms of the open space and recreation applications, if you look at the numbers, there weren't that many, and the dollar total wasn't that high. And I think that reflects the fact that the department realized that there were other priorities. But given that they did realize that when they submitted the applications, it would be a shame to cut back even further on the applications from Parks and Open Space, which are already a very small percentage of the overall total, or a fairly small percentage, I should say, not necessarily very, but you've seen the numbers on the table. So I just wanted to make that point. Ann Coles, I think, has been aware of the work of the committee. She couldn't make it tonight, apparently, but I did want to speak up for the old burying ground in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
We didn't cut any money on the old bury. We didn't cut any money.
I know. I began by saying, I think you've done the right thing. And I just want to, reiterate that that's good, and I support it, and offer a few more reasons. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no more hands raised, I'll call an end to the public hearing, and let's have a vote. So Were the options clearly enough outlined for everyone, or do we need to see that chart again?
Please give me the Windows number again. Maybe put it up. I can write it down.
I think it's 398, 317.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we have in the chart now, David.
Okay.
So this chart, Laura will send it to you and to me and to anybody else who wants it, so we'll know exactly what we're funding in the warrant.
Yeah. So now if we pass this, I'll begin to work on a draft of the warrant article. Laura sent me a draft. We can fill in a lot of items.
Yeah, the only thing, now that we have the numbers identified, we need to make sure we know what bucket they're gonna come out of, if it's, unallocated or a specific bucket.
I did see.
Yeah, those are the numbers that I looked at the town financial plan. I have those numbers, so I'll do those, and we have to, I think, bring it back at the next meeting before we submit it.
Okay, so we will need a wrap-up meeting next week, so count on that on Monday night.
Yeah. Nancy, I just wanted to note that I only saw it up there briefly, but I did notice that after we made these last adjustments, that the proportion of the funds that was going to open space and recreation went from 8% up to 11%. So it may not
That's
meet your
good.
goal of equalizing, but at least it meets the statutory requirement of at least 10%.
Right,
Well-
and it's also getting us closer to a
Yeah.
and historic preservation also went up. So and with community housing down a little bit, we're getting to a more equal kind of situation, which
Yeah.
I'm happy about, because I believe that's what we promised the voters. So
That's what the law says is to spend or reserve. So what we don't spend, we reserve, and we still need to spend it at a future
right.
round.
Right. Okay, so is everybody clear about what we're voting on and the amounts here?
Yep.
Okay, so can you take the chart down now so that I can see people's faces, Laura? And we'll vote on this chart. So can I have a motion?
I move.
Okay, David moves that we accept the chart as we've discussed tonight with the attendant cuts and getting us.
second it.
Okay,
Clara will
Uh,
second it.
Claire seconds. Okay, and getting us to the 4,072,000 plus revenue expenditure. Okay, all in favor? Clara,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Minnie,
I,
Sam,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Sue,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, so we're gonna have, maybe Laura could present a draft next week. And we will also have the other information that David mentioned. And we can vote finally on the actual, if next week we can do that, then we don't have to have a meeting on February 9th.
Yeah.
I think that probably suits everybody's fancy. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Aye.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
I think we did a good thing tonight.
Hello.